Tim Graham and Friends is brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and business consultants. CTBK is a leading accounting firm with a growing team of accountants and business consultants with roots in Amherst, New York. CTBK pairs every project with a focus on a human connection between its team and the client. For assurance, accounting, taxes, litigation support, and advice on mergers and acquisitions, CTBK is available and ready to solve any issue your business faces. For a consultation or to request a quote, call 716-630-2400. Again, that's 716-630-2400. CTBK, over a quarter century of proven accounting and business excellence for Western New York and beyond. Welcome to Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and business consultants. I am Tim Graham of The Athletic, here with Jonah Bronstein of Bronstein Amalgamated, and also Matthew Fairburn. He covers the Bills for The Athletic. And let's just stay on the hot topic of the day. There's really no need to go looking for anything extra. Sean McDermott, Brandon Beane speak to the media for the first time in a little bit. Josh Allen, Tremaine Edmunds, a couple of Bills captains. They also were available on Zoom calls to media today. And it seems as though the vaccination topic really touches a nerve with fans, which means I think we should stay on it. And Matthew, you were listening in on the conference calls. You were monitoring practice. There are players who are not there today. We can get into that also. But the one thing that I found interesting regarding Josh Allen and Tremaine Edmunds and their response to the vaccination questions, pretty much just saying it's a personal decision and I'm going to keep it private. And I respect that. But I think that the fact that they are keeping it to themselves, they are keeping it private, is because they know it's a powder keg. And it is a potential distraction. And Sean McDermott pretty much spelled out what Brandon Beane had hinted at before. The Bills want these guys vaccinated.
Yeah, I thought Sean McDermott handled everything really well in regards to the vaccination topic. And he didn't dance around anything. He handled follow-up questions and expanded on it. He himself he's been fully vaccinated and stressed that that's important, for the well-being of the team, the organization, but also the community. And he acknowledged the real concern that we brought up, a few months ago with Josh Allen's original comments, that it will, he's concerned about getting to that threshold and having that competitive advantage. So if there are many reasons, I think, to get vaccinated, but that's to be the one that makes this a very newsworthy topic for the Bills and for the NFL in general. Is if it's going to be a lot different for a team that doesn't meet that threshold than a team that does, then absolutely it's noteworthy. A lot of people responding to tweets, and it's been this way for a long time. You tweet anything about a player and the vaccine, it's who cares? Who cares whether Josh Allen's getting it? Leave him alone. Who cares what football players have to say about vaccinations, et cetera? But when it impacts how the team can operate day to day, and when it impacts potentially the availability of those players, they're going to get asked about it. And, like you said, they don't really need to share whether they've been vaccinated if they want to. That seems to be the playbook that a lot of people in sports are following. LeBron James, then Josh Allen, Tremaine Edmunds today. I'm just not going to share that information. Josh Allen kind of opened up Pandora's box a little bit when he talked about it originally. It's the same as Cole Beasley having his tweets and then saying, man, why is everybody on my case about having my opinion? It's like, well, you need to have, kind of the consequences that come with that opinion. So I think, with Josh Allen, it was a little disappointing today, kind of dancing around the issue and, kind of, making it seem like, kind of brushing off the questions. I thought Sean McDermott, though, handled it well. And I think that matters because how he handles it inside the walls is what will ultimately determine how close they can get to whatever threshold the NFL does set.
And Matt, you made a lot of good points. Pretty much made every good point that I wanted to make. But one thing I wanted to maybe push back on a little bit with what Josh said and Tim referenced, and what a lot of people said, whether it's LeBron James or anybody that's come out and said this is a personal decision about me and my family, and I don't owe it to anybody to express my opinion or my thoughts or to answer the question. And yeah, nobody's on the stand here, so Josh Allen doesn't have to answer any question that's asked to him. But with regard to the vaccination, this is a public health issue. This is a overall, your vaccination status affects you, your family, your community, your neighbors, your coworkers, your teammates, everybody in that organization from a health standpoint, and also the standpoint of the vaccine thresholds and what the Bills can do in practice, and whether or not the Bills need to know whether Josh Allen's vaccinated, and I'm sure they do. So Josh Allen, LeBron James, any athlete that doesn't wish to get vaccinated, but then wants to use the shield of privacy and saying, I don't really have to explain my thoughts to you. I think they do owe us an explanation of what their thinking is and why this is important to them, why they're going against the grain, why they're jeopardizing public health and our ability to get back to normal economically and everything related to this pandemic, instead of kind of just hiding behind, today's a football practice and I only want to talk about football today.
Yeah, I think, that's a good point. And the question I wanted to ask Josh Allen before the press conference ended was sort of twofold, is like, number one, what he's learned about his platform since all that happened, like, and the weight that carries, because it is important, like it or not, like what he says does matter, but also just curious what he's done to educate himself, because I think that's a big piece of this that I think people are missing in the crowd of people who say it's his choice, leave him alone. It's not whether he wants chicken or steak at the wedding. It's, as you mentioned, a public health issue, an issue that impacts his team. And so if he doesn't want to get vaccinated, which I think if he had been vaccinated, he probably would have shared that information. Maybe not, because maybe there's certain people he doesn't want to upset on the other side of the issue. But it's the same thing with Cole Beasley that frustrated me, is there was no opinion there. The opinion was, don't tell me what to do. And if you want to share an opinion or share a reason, or you have a legitimate reason, saying I'm going to keep it personal tells me that maybe you don't have a legitimate reason. And I think treating both sides as equal in this case probably isn't the right thing to do. And like I said, it's not just a personal choice of, does he want to wear a visor or not wear a visor, or does he want blue cleats or red cleats? Like, both sides are not equal. The evidence on both sides is not equal in this case. And so perhaps, especially, in the case of, people like Cole Beasley or Rachel Bush sharing things that aren't true, you need to have something to back up your opinion if that is in fact your opinion.
And if your opinion is, I do what I want and I don't want to talk about it, that's pretty immature thinking.
I will say this, though. I don't know that I disagree with the team's approach. It sounds like they had a team meeting based on what Tremaine Edmunds and Josh Allen both said. This could be a way for them to try to limit the distraction. Let's just keep it all in-house. You can say it's your personal choice, because as soon as one of us says, look, maybe they're learning from what the mistake Josh made when he was on Kyle Brandt's podcast and said what he said, or what Cole Beasley did on Twitter, or what Jordan Poyer has liked or favorited or retweeted regarding his wife and her beliefs. All the other players that have liked and retweeted and jumped in and said, yeah, you tell them. It is maybe the team's way of trying to get a handle on the distraction aspect of it. Yes, I think that we're talking 3 people on this podcast who've been vaccinated, who agree with getting vaccinated. But within that locker room, much like maybe even having a discussion of saying, look, guys, whatever it is you think, we're just going to have to not talk about it in public to the media at an event, whatever, whether it's our political beliefs or whether we're pro life or or we're for abortion rights or like whatever third rail issue is out there. It could just be these guys having an agreement that we're just not going to talk about it. And then going out today, and Josh Allen and Tremaine Edmunds happened to be the first two. Maybe Tremaine Edmunds wanted to say one way or the other. Yes, I've been vaccinated. No, I think it's stupid. But he said he didn't say anything. And so we're not really going to know until we get more Bills out there talking about this. But it seems as though at least these first two guys, as captains, have said they've come to an agreement. And this is what we're going to get as media. Now, is that going to hold up? Probably not, because somebody's not going to be able to help themselves, and somebody's going to tweet something, or somebody's going to say something, or somebody's just going to do something that they think is innocuous, like a retweet or a like, and people are going to notice. But anyways, so I'm not, I don't by any means want to let Josh Allen and Tremaine Edmunds off the hook for not taking a stance one way or the other. But I think it's a team decision, which I can respect. But I side with, on this issue, the coach and the general manager, who don't need to be beholden to the PA or whatever rules, and they can say, we want you vaccinated. And I think it's pretty obvious when you listen to the coach and the general manager and don't just want to listen to and protect Joshy like a lot of fans do. Whatever Josh wants is whatever Josh gets. How about leaning towards the guy who built the team and the guy who coaches the team and the people who have looked for every little winning edge that they can find? They see one here, and it is to get vaccinated.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm with you on the idea that they handled it. It goes back to Sean McDermott. From McDermott down, I think have handled this well from a front office, coaching staff, leadership standpoint. And if that's a piece of it, because something I wrote about when I wrote about Cole Beasley's comments was that Rachel Bush said she thinks that more than half the team agrees and won't be getting vaccinated. And you can say what you want about how credible a source Rachel Bush may or may not be, but on that particular issue, she knows
she's talking to more players than we are.
Yeah, she knows these players and their wives better than we do. And so I think Sean McDermott handling it this way could potentially limit the divisive nature or the distraction element of this for the team, because that is a real thing too. If you've got guys, dug in on both sides, we're only really hearing from one side, by the way. We've only really heard guys really passionate or hesitant or whatever you want to say about the vaccine. There hasn't been a lot the other way other than Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane. But I do think there could be a unifying element to, look, let's talk this out. We're a family. This guy thinks this guy thinks this, but we're a family and we keep that all in house, and we don't let those guys on the outside they're going to try to tear us apart, using us as reporters, the media, as the common enemy or whatever you want to say.
Sean McDermott didn't do that today.
Right. He didn't. He
went ahead and, like wading into the water with his arms spread, just like coming in. He's like, I'm going to tell you what I'm doing and what I think is right.
And I think
if these guys choose to listen to me, he's kind of like, don't. And if there is a COVID problem, don't blame me.
I think that's where he handled it well, is he was able to say, look, this is what I'm doing. This is what I think. And I think he was able to say everything you're saying. Like, we want these guys vaccinated without saying enough to get a player all all bent out of shape.
Let me read real quick the lead to John Warrow's story in the Associated Press. Just to sum it up, this is the Associated Press. John Warrow, of course, friend of the show. You know him on here. He's a local guy, but this is the story that goes out to the world from the Associated Press. This is the story if somebody wants to write or post in their newspaper or their website what's going on in NFL and what a team is thinking regarding COVID. NFL roundups or whatever. This is the story that is going to be printed in that paper or posted on that website. Bills coach Sean McDermott raised concern his team could fall behind in having COVID-19 protocol restrictions loosened for the start of training camp if enough players aren't vaccinated. Raised concern his team could fall behind. All right. Second paragraph. In addressing what's become a divisive issue among several high-profile Buffalo players and at least one of their spouses on Tuesday, McDermott focused his message on attempting to educate rather than convince, as he put it, players to get vaccinated. Without saying how many Bills have received the vaccine, McDermott said, time is running short for Buffalo to return to a sense of normalcy in terms of holding full team meetings and practices. If you're a Bills fan and you want Joshy and Cole and all those guys to be able to do whatever they want because I like them and I want them to be happy and I don't want them to think bad of Buffalo and they're just get out there and play. That's all Sean McDermott cares about too. Sean McDermott wants his people to be happy and ready to play at the utmost. And that spells it out right there. I just, it's frustrating to see the pushback from fans who just want people to leave Josh and the boys alone.
I'm sure he wants them healthy as well too. And aren't there doctors and trainers and scientists and medical people, professionals in the organization that can explain to these athletes from a standpoint of we care about you and your health and your family and anybody else that you could put at risk with not being vaccinated and get them to believe. And maybe that's what's going on. What I read today is that the Bills are trying to educate Josh Allen and some of these players that are hesitant.
Yeah,
they didn't
but
want
Jonah,
it
as you
done
know,
in public.
You know, this football locker room, they're not in a bubble of, as much as we like to think of them as these, cyber, these, almost like Terminators. They come off an assembly line and they're just focused on football and that's all they do. And they're in this training facility that, looks like something out of the Avengers. And that's all they do is they get in this facility and they train and it's their life and that's all they do. But these people come from society and the same society that we see reflected on the news, whether you're watching Fox News or CNN or the local news, whatever, whether you're reading the Associated Press or the Huffington Post. These are people with, as we've mentioned, wives and family and parents who all have very polarizing opinions. And so, yeah, you're right. There may be doctors who are telling, but look, think of all the people out in our lives. I have people in my family who know what the medical, college graduates are like, yeah, but I don't trust it. I don't trust the science. I don't trust the doctors. And I think that these football players, they've also been taught not to trust the NFL in some ways, throughout their upbringing, whether it be from the union or whatever. I'm not saying that's to be subversive, but you can't just, there's such a roiling stew, a stew of sewage, maybe, of thought on this that is just, as soon as you tell them one thing, you're not believed. And it goes for both sides. I will both sides of this issue. Soon as, so if you've already had an opinion that the vaccine is dangerous, maybe even come from the African-American community and the history there and we see the numbers for the Black population and how they're down regarding vaccinations because of a trust, going back to Tuskegee and various things. It's just, so I don't know that a doctor, whether they're, again, I don't want to keep going on these mini tangents. I mean, imagine a doctor telling Jack Eichel what he thinks, a Sabres doctor. Jack Eichel's going to say, screw off. there's guys in that locker room who've had similar issues with the Bills doctor, and everybody's had their issues. So the NFL wants me out on that field, so they're going to jab me with that needle. Yeah, I'm not trusting the NFL. I mean,
right, but this is the issue with anti-vaccines and the hesitancy and the education towards that overall, especially in minority communities. The messaging is go talk to your personal doctor, your pastor, your rabbi, whoever you trust, and ask them your questions about the vaccine. And it's being done in ways on like YouTube. You can get somebody that you trust will talk to a doctor on your behalf. And when you get the information that, the rest of us have, that we've internalized, oftentimes it leads to a different decision. And the more information you get from trusted sources, the better informed you are to make the right decision about this vaccine. And maybe the Bills are doing that. Maybe we shouldn't assume that they're not doing that in good faith. But it seems like these players haven't gotten good advice yet from their agents, from the Players Association. It doesn't have to be only from the doctors that are trying to shame you into getting this thing.
Yeah, I think there's a resistance to all information these days. People have made up their minds. They make up their minds early. And I think that they just reject things that make them work, self-reflection, reconsideration, all these types of things. What's that, Matthew?
Change. People don't want to change,
right.
Go back on what they've said. Cole Beasley doesn't want to come out and tweet, you know what, after some consideration and reflection and talking to people who would know, I've decided to get vaccinated. You don't even see a lot of players coming out and saying that in the NFL. You don't see them coming out, at least Bills players, with their vaccine pictures or, what have you. And
I think the education is happening, but
I think so too.
But that doesn't mean that it's going to work.
But it's not it can't be, it's a weird line to toe if you're Sean McDermott, Brandon Beane, the Bills, and you're sitting there thinking about how do we, he said it's not about convincing, it's about educating. Well, that's part of convincing is not using the word convince because they don't want to seem too heavy-handed about it. They want to be able to allow these guys to change their mind, hopefully convince them to change their mind without it having to have been a struggle or a conflict where they're giving in, right? Josh Allen or Cole Beasley is giving in by getting the vaccine. Like, no, they want it to be more of like they lead them to the water type of situation and I understand why from a team building standpoint, even if, as Jonah has mentioned, like, maybe it needs to be a little bit more, maybe it needs to be, more than that. But from a keeping the locker room together standpoint, that's the way that it makes sense to do it so that you're not alienating people as the head coach of the team.
I think the best way, based on the information that we have, if you're a Bills fan, this is my opinion, but if I'm a Bills fan and I want this team to take the next step and to build off of last season and to not have any pratfalls, to get itself into unforced errors by getting vaccinated, but also based on the information that we received today through Josh Allen and Tremaine Edmunds, my hope is that these guys all got together and said, guys, we know that as a team, we need to get vaccinated if we want the best possible chance of winning the Super Bowl. However, we're not going to tell anybody because we're going to respect your privacy and your rights. And I know that you have people in your lives, or you've already said you're not getting it and you want to save face, whatever. But if you're a member of this team, now it's difficult to get 80 guys at this stage, to agree on anything. But that's like best case scenario for me. I don't think that's true, but maybe there's a small percentage that happened and they all just said, guys, we're getting vaccinated. We're just not going to tell anybody because it's nobody's business. But for us, we need to get vaccinated. Now, the education part, I think this is a good time to bring up who was not there today, because if Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane have the objective of educating because they can't force these guys to get vaccinations, but they want to have the opportunity to educate them. They don't have a lot of opportunities to educate these guys over the summer.
I don't have a lot of time.
Right. That's what John Morrow's getting at, to get to training camp. So to get a crack at some of these guys to say, you got to get the vaccination. A lot of these guys aren't in the building. Some of it might be personal reasons. Some of it might be because of the NFLPA's campaign to have players not attend voluntary workouts. So Matthew, what was the attendance today? There were some key people who weren't there on Tuesday.
Yeah, there was 70 plus was the number that McDermott gave before practice started, but a good chunk of that 70 plus. I mean, if you look at the guys that were absent, Stephon Diggs was absent, Emmanuel Sanders was absent, Devin Singletary was not there, though we're told he has been there at some point, so perhaps that was just a today thing. No Mitch Morse, no Darrell Williams, no Jerry Hughes, no Mario Addison, no Vernon Butler, no Star Lotulelei. That's four significant defensive linemen, two starting offensive linemen. Tywan Jones was not there. One of your key special teams guys, two starting receivers, and one of the top two running backs. So it's a healthy chunk of the starting lineup that was not in attendance. Now there are NFLPA and NFL issues being worked out. Some veterans are kind of making the point to not go to these things because they want some changes. These are
some
all
of it
voluntary.
Could be COVID related. Some of it could be, hey,
Some
I
of
don't
it-
like the fact that more guys aren't vaccinated.
Very possible. It could be individual for every guy. It could point out, varying circumstances among those, 10 or so players that weren't there. We don't know exactly why with every one of them, but they're, these are voluntary. They don't have to be there. Those are, big name players, I think. It wasn't just a handful of, insignificant guys. This is a pretty decent group of, the core. And last year, a big chunk of the core was in the middle of a pandemic, flying down to Florida to get some work in, and everybody was excited about that. And they stress the importance of these things, and those guys aren't there. So I'm curious to see what that'll look like. I'm sure they'll be there once things are mandatory. There's still so much mess that has to be sorted through between the NFL and the NFLPA. The NFLPA's messaging on this has been all over the place. You have some teams, like you said, Tim, that aren't there for COVID reasons, right? For safety. Like, we're still sorting this out, but be a hard case to make, I guess, in Buffalo where, unless you are, like you said, you're a player who says, I don't know how many of my teammates got this thing and I got family at home. Like, I don't want to risk it. And because you've got guys, you can't make the COVID safety argument and then also not get vaccinated unless you have a medical or religious reason. I don't think those two arguments would really square up. So, yeah, I think overall decent attendance. It's not as if they don't have enough people to conduct a practice, but a good chunk of the, Mario Addison, was after the draft, they were talking about how great it will be to have Mario teach Greg Rousseau and Boogie Basham to be pros. And, he's not there. They talked about all those reps Stephon Diggs and Josh missed last year, how they were playing catch up in training camp, and he's not here. The same would seemingly apply to Emmanuel Sanders. So again, I was going to ask Josh about Stephon Diggs and, if he'd talked to him and gotten together or anything, but press conference was cut a little short. So I don't know. I think the attendance is worth monitoring because of who was missing, not necessarily how many of them were missing.
Can I ask you, as far as what's different from a practice last year in terms of, are they still testing every day in the same way? And for you as the media, are you still subject to the testing? And how is vaccination play a role in who gets to cover practice and go where and do what in the building?
Well, so the thing is, as a player, if you're vaccinated, you only have to be tested once a week. And if you are unvaccinated, you need to be tested every day. If you're vaccinated, you don't need to wear your mask. This is all as a player. You don't need to wear your mask. If you are not vaccinated, you do need to wear your mask. Now, that doesn't apply on the practice field. So it wasn't like we could look around and be like, all right, who hasn't been vaccinated? However, during the year, if that rule holds up and we're allowed in the building at some point, then we would conceivably be able to look around and say, all right, this guy has his mask on, probably hasn't been vaccinated. But from a media standpoint, there was a change today. Masks were not required. Practice is outside. We're not allowed in the building still, not allowed in the media room. There's still a limited number of media who can attend practice, but the number seems to have gone up. I think it was, around 20. There were more spots than people interested in covering practice. It was, plenty of spots, but we were not required to wear masks outside, but we did not have to show proof of vaccination either. It was just, kind of, we were outside. I know the PFWA and the NFL are kind of working through what everything's going to look like in terms of, do we need to show proof of vaccination to get certain access to the building? But right now we have no access to the building anyway. So I think that's where they probably don't care whether we're vaccinated because it doesn't, it, at this point isn't an issue. But there's still no in-person interviews, which eventually have to come back. I mean, it's getting to a point where it's a little odd that we all have to scurry to our cars and wait, however long to log into a Zoom to get, called on and, the whole thing. Now, I don't know if Josh Allen has the vaccine, so perhaps that impacts, whether he would be able to talk to us in person. Maybe that would be his reason to avoid it. But Sean McDermott being fully vaccinated, I see no reason why he can't stand outside and, us as fully vaccinated media members can't stand there and ask him questions.
We did an indoor
Especially
press
outdoors,
conference at
but-
UV. There was some
Right.
pacing going on there, but we were inside that field house when they introduced the new coach.
But they are back into that regular season rules in terms of all that stuff. So they have not yet switched the in-person thing. They're allowed to do it. There were teams that hosted media during the draft. They're allowed to do it. Teams have been doing in-person press conferences in the NFL for a while. The Broncos, the Cowboys, the Jaguars all did stuff in the offseason. So eventually you would think that would change. It's not going to change, I wouldn't think, anytime soon. Although, all it takes is something to get agreed upon. But everything seems to be so sticky because of the NFLPA squabble, because they haven't agreed on anything about what this all looks like. The media stuff is sort of the last thing that they tack on, and
Well, the Bills announced today that all season tickets are sold out. And that's really kind of based on still, I mean, it hasn't been official, but the last word we heard about attendance was you have to be vaccinated, according to Mark Polenkars, the Erie County executive. So you have fans that are vaccinated. The media, I don't know if there are any outliers out there. I haven't seen any media members say I'm not getting vaccinated. That's not to say that there aren't any that exist, but I think it seems like most who I talk to have or will be getting vaccinated. The players might be the last holdout of the whole mess, because the NFL and the broadcasters, they're not going to let unvaccinated people down on the sidelines holding cameras, or the sound crews, or anybody. They're not going to let those people down on the field level. So all stadium workers, all that stuff, anybody who you can control to be vaccinated will be vaccinated. The players seem to be like the last frontier.
Yeah, they can't control the players without an agreement with the PA. And, a lot of it seems to be, don't tell me what to do. Don't. And how many of the,
when to do it.
Right. And when
it seems like some of these guys are like, yeah, I'll get it someday.
And
right.
Which is, it still strikes me, and I know I've made this point on previous podcasts, but in a line of work where your entire life is being told what to do and where to show up and when to do it for the betterment of the team, for what's best for you.
And sometimes
Um,
what pain-killing drugs or
Right. All the stuff that,
relaxers, things you need to take to play this game.
all the shit that they put in their bodies and that put their lives, their brains out there on the turf every Sunday afternoon. But for whatever reason, this is a line. I mean, we know what the reason is. It's because
Well, I
it's been politicized, but
Well, maybe
yeah,
maybe because the Bills had such a wonderful season during a pandemic, some of these players just don't want it to end.
Could be. They did do pretty well with it, didn't they? If they have different rules, though,
superstition.
that's the thing. Finding that edge, as Tim mentioned, I think probably the best argument that they can make to these players to get the vaccine is you're getting this to give us the best possible chance to win a Super Bowl. Because what do these guys just rattled off the list there of what these guys will do for a Super Bowl? Well, or for a career or whatever. And, add it to the list. I think there's a rabbit hole of reasoning you can go down on the vaccine issue that becomes, just go into my Twitter mentions at any time I tweet about it and you'll find those people. But inside the locker room, that argument is probably the one that gets it done for a lot of guys, is put your feelings aside and take one for the team here. But they're running out of time in a somewhat, it's kind of snuck up on me a little bit that they're running out of time, unless guys are getting the one shot, and then 2 weeks later they're fully vaccinated. Otherwise,
it's almost June, man.
You're waiting 6 weeks, really, if you got the shot today, to when you'll be considered 2 weeks clear of your second shot and fully vaccinated. And that's mid-July at this point.
And July is when people in the NFL historically, traditionally go on their big vacations, because it's when everything's shut down, going on your cruises, getting on your airplanes, going around the country, doing all that stuff. All right, before we wrap up, I just want to mention, and I want to just ask you guys real quick. The fans really seem to be pissed off at the media for even asking these questions. And you know what happens when fans get upset? They start to throw money at something. Talking about Bills fans anyway. They're going to own if you're going to own the media, what's the quintessential donation? What GoFundMe do you start up? Because you can't just keep giving O'Shea all your money just because you want to keep backing Josh Allen. If you want to stick up for Josh Allen for taking too many vaccination questions, where should fans be sending their money? Or where do you predict they will start sending their money to own the media?
I think the place to start would be John Morrow's bar tab at the Swanee House.
I don't know if he'll learn. Yeah,
like
that's right. Start paying his bar. Yeah, you're right. That's a good one.
that'd be how you own them. Because at first I was like,
Cash only though. You can't use those GoFundMe
true.
Bitcoins there.
Because that's what at first I was like, Tim's, make a wish.
What would make John Morrow cry? Because that's what they want to do, is like they want to bring it. They want to be like, oh my God, like I was so wrong.
Yeah.
They want to, and that would make John Morrow cry if you just gave him a big standing tab at the Swanee House.
Yeah, if he walked into the Swanee House and the guy was like, look, your next $20,000 worth of drinks have been paid for, I think John might shed a tear or two.
Well, I would say if people don't like that we talk about the vaccine, or you guys ask those questions when you get the opportunities, they can give the money to CTBK, and maybe money can be invested and come back to you as even more money. Or if you want to give to my organization, which has been renamed the New Bronstein Times, we're always taking donations and mergers and acquisitions at New Bronstein Times Company.
Okay, I like that. New Bronstein Times. CTBK. Send them your money. Put it in a fund. Put it in like some kind of escrow where it can build, and that'll teach us all a lesson.
Is a good one.
What's that, Matthew?
Make-A-Wish, Western New York is
Right.
Tim's charity of choice.
That would really kick me in the nuts. If you sent a lot of money to Make-A-Wish of Western New York, I would really be pissed off and feel quite owned if you were to do that. So please do that.
The Sabres, they're a rather underfunded organization right now.
Right. Send all your money to Mike Harrington. Just start to get the NFL writers upset, or any of the Sabres writers. John Vogel, of course, John will kick some of that back because he's a good guy. Send your money to UB for UB football program.
Maybe we should all just open our tip jars on Twitter, that new function they have on Twitter, and they can just give it directly to us.
How about this? Well, that's a good point. We start a GoFundMe. If it reaches a certain level, we will no longer talk about it. You buy us off. You basically pay us off as fans. If you really don't want to hear us talk about vaccinations anymore, you send us, I don't know, 5 cents, $5. Just send us money. And if we reach a certain threshold, we will no longer talk about it.
Or if the Bills reach a certain threshold, one or the other.
In terms of like their percentage vaccination?
Yeah, exactly. Either they reach the threshold or we reach it. That's when it'll stop being a topic.
Okay. I like it. We could raise some money and the money goes to Make-A-Wish. Or do we want to put it in our pockets?
It goes to Waro and to Make-A-Wish.
Okay. I think this could work.
Waro is a Make-A-Wish kid.
His wish is just to get to
Make a
the
Wawa
Swanee.
wish.
Well, at least once a week. All right, guys. Thanks for this. We'll talk later in the week. Thank you for listening to Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK. Tim Graham and Friends is brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and business consultants. CTBK is a leading accounting firm with a growing team of accountants and business consultants with roots in Amherst, New York. CTBK pairs every project with a focus on a human connection between its team and the client. For assurance, accounting, taxes, litigation support, and advice on mergers and acquisitions, CTBK is available and ready to solve any issue your business faces. For a consultation or to request a quote, call 716-630-2400. Again, that's 716-630-2400. CTBK, over a quarter century of proven accounting and business excellence for Western New York and beyond.
Thank you.